righty, we're on Genesis chapter 48. We're not quite going to finish Genesis tonight, but these are two very important chapters. Verse 1 of chapter 48 says, "Now it came about after these things that Joseph was told, 'Behold, your father is sick.' So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him." Now this is the first reference in Scripture to illness. And we don't know how much time has passed, but it's been years. The individual blessings of Israel on his children and the two children of Joseph have significance for the historical development, and also they have prophetic implications also. Verse 2, "When it was told to Jacob, 'Behold, your son Joseph has come to you,' Israel collected his strength and sat up in the bed." Okay, so Jacob, he's an old geezer by this time. He's near the time of his death. He's probably 147 at this time. He's lost most of his sight. He can't see well at all. But he does muster up the strength to sit up, and he wants to speak to Joseph and his two sons. Verse 3, "Then Jacob said to Joseph, Elohim Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me." Now he's referring, Luz, the original name of Luz is Bethel. Okay, in Genesis 28, verse 19, "And he called the name of that place Bethel. However, previously the name of the city had been called Luz." So he named it Bethel later. Now he's referring to this dream that he had there at Bethel about the stairway leading to heaven. Verse 4, "And he said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and numerous, and I'll make you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your descendants after you for an everlasting possession." So the wording of this promise here, I'll make you fruitful and numerous, and I'll make you a company or a multitude of people. So really, two parts to the promise. He's going to make him fruitful and numerous, is the first part. Then Elohim promises to make him a multitude of people, a multitude of nations. And that multitude will include all nationalities from all over the world. In Amos 9, starting at verse 11, we read, "In that day I will raise up the fallen booth of David and wall up its breaches. I will also raise up its ruins and rebuild it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom and all the nations who are called by my name, declares Yahweh who does this. Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when the plowman will overtake the reaper and the treader of grapes him who sows seed, when the mountains will drip sweet wine and all the hills will be dissolved. Also I will restore the captivity of my people Israel, and they'll rebuild the ruined cities and live in them. They'll also plant vineyards and drink their wine and make gardens and eat their fruit. I'll also plant them on their land, and they'll not again be rooted out from their land which I've given them, says Yahweh, your Elohim." Now after Elohim multiplies him, Elohim will give this land as an everlasting possession. And this is his promise, which is forever. That was back in Genesis 17, verse 8. "And I will give to you and to your descendants after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim." Now, notice how as we've gone through Genesis and other scriptures, everything focuses on the Hebrew people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their descendants, and everything focuses on that land, okay? That land is very important. The people are very important. And as we go through all of Scripture, it's the same thing. It's those people in that land. How did it go from that, from the Hebrew people and that land of Israel? How did a third of the world go to Gentile groups of people and then living up on a cloud? How did that happen? I just find it interesting how, I'm listening to the ball game on the way here, baseball game, and lots of swings and misses, but nothing that bad. This is the batter's there, and then the ball's watches it sail over the backstop. Yeah. Sure. Yes. Yes.
Well, that tells me that heaven is going to be land,
Yeah.
people. I mean, vineyards, great vineyards, very fruitful. I mean, who's going to be strumming the violin and smoking the pipe?
Yeah, I know. That's what I don't get. Where's the playing the harp? Don't forget playing the harp. They would play harps up there, and be on the cloud.
I forgot to read ahead.
Yeah, you didn't.
They drink their wine and they make gardens and eat their food.
Yeah.
But didn't it change when they went to Constantine, though, when Constantine's era?
Yeah.
As he began the bias toward the Jews, and then the Greek philosophies and stuff began to be.
That was it.
And that's when we fly away to heaven.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, there's no way to read this book and come up with Christianity. You know? Or Easter eggs, well, that's Christianity. It's just Sunday worship, sing the songs, pass the plate. You just don't come up from that by studying the scriptures. Okay, verses 5 and 6 of Genesis 48. And now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. But your offspring that have been born after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the names of their brothers in their inheritance. Jacob is adopting Ephraim and Manasseh. They were the sons of Joseph, born to him when he was in Egypt, before Israel and Joseph were reunited. Jacob wishes for Joseph, he wants him to have a double inheritance. That's his favorite son, that's what he wants. And he does this by bypassing Joseph and going straight to his sons and adopting them. Now, there's going to be a double portion that goes to Joseph. Verse 7. Now, as for me, when I came from Paddan, Rachel died to my sorrow in the land of Canaan on the journey, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. Well, Rachel died in Canaan and was buried there in Bethlehem. Cliff, I remember you were asking me at Passover, where does Bethlehem Ephrathah come from? That's where it comes from. It's just specifying Bethlehem is what it is. Now, the Apostle Matthew spoke that Rachel, symbolizing mothers in Israel, wept over the death of their young sons in Bethlehem and Ramah due to the atrocities of Herod. That's in Matthew 2, starting at verse 16. Then when Herod saw that he had been tricked by the Magi, he became very enraged and sent and slew all the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all its environs, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had ascertained from the Magi. Then that which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled, saying, a voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be comforted because they were no more. Verses 8 and 9 of Genesis 48. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, who are these? And Joseph said to his father, they are my sons, whom Elohim has given me here. So he said, bring them to me, please, that I may bless them. Now, Jacob trusts this son. Okay? He trusts him. Israel knows that Joseph will be truthful to him. Remember what he did to his father? When he was old and blind and on the bed, kind of tricked him. Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, uh-huh, that's true. Well, he trusts this son. Well, if you notice, Isaac didn't really trust Jacob. You remember? He kept quizzing him. Well, that doesn't sound like my Esau. Verses 10 and 11. Now the eyes of Israel were so dim from age that he could not see. Then Joseph brought them close to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face, and behold, Elohim has let me see your children as well. So Jacob knows the blessings of Elohim are abundant in nature. He would have died happily if he just got to see Joseph again, and he did. But he not only spent the last 17 years of his life with Joseph, He also spent them with his 2 grandchildren from Joseph as well. Verse 12, then Joseph took them from his knees and bowed with his face to the ground. You know, you got the most powerful man in Egypt here, but that doesn't keep him from giving his father the reverence that he deserves. That's ancient Egyptian custom. It's still honored today, by the way. Verses 13 and 14. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand and toward Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn. Now Joseph brought his sons to his father so that the right hand, now the right hand is symbolic of action and power. And Joseph knew that should rest on the older one, which is Manasseh. But Jacob, knowing what he was going to do, he crossed his arms. He put his right hand on Ephraim instead of Manasseh. The physical contact between the donor and the recipient of the blessing heightens the sense of intimacy and also emotion at this time. Verse 15, and he blessed Joseph and said, the Elohim before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the Elohim who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and may my name live on in them, and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. When he's speaking of the angel, he's talking about that manifestation of Elohim that he wrestled with. Hosea spoke of that in Hosea 12, verses 4 and 5. Yes, he wrestled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and saw his favor. He found him at Bethel, and there he spoke with us. Even Yahweh, the Elohim of hosts, Yahweh is his name. Verse 17, Genesis 48. When Joseph saw that his father had laid his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him, and he grasped his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. You know, Joseph thought his dad made a mistake because he's old. No eyesight anymore. But Israel corrects him by saying, no, this is what I intended. I wanted to do that. He says, he tells Joseph, Elohim has chosen a course of action from which they could not deviate. Verse 20. And if you notice, who was blessed from Abraham's son, the older or the younger? It was the younger. It was Isaac. And out of Isaac's 2 sons, who was the first? There were twins. The younger again. And he's doing that again here. Verse 20, and he blessed them that day, saying, by you Israel shall pronounce blessing, saying, may Elohim make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. So they were both large tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh were. Joshua came from the tribe of Ephraim. That's in Numbers 13, verse 8. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, that's Joshua, the son of Nun. Verse 21. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I'm about to die, but Elohim will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Joseph did rest in the land of his fathers, but it was over 400 years later. Moses brought the bones of Joseph out of Egypt, and the men of Israel buried him in the land of his father. I don't know if you recall that or not, but Moses gathered up the bones of Joseph when they left. In Joshua 24, verse 32, now they buried the bones of Joseph, which the sons of Israel brought up from Egypt, at Shechem, in the piece of ground which Jacob had bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. And they became the inheritance of Joseph's sons. Verse 22, and I give you one portion more than your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword, and my bow. Apparently, Jacob is referring to the Amorites who were circumcised by some of Jacob's sons. Then they killed them and plundered their land. Jacob is taking responsibility for his son's actions. That was not a good day, by the way. Jacob wasn't happy. It didn't go the way he wanted it. His sons kind of planned that out. But if you'll recall, Jacob settled his family there for like 18 months. He never should have done that. He should have gone on back to the land he was supposed to go toward, and he stayed there in a pagan area. Then his daughter was a little bit loose, and she caused problems. Then the brothers got mad, and it was just a mess. Chapter 49, verse 1. Then Jacob summoned his sons and said, "Assemble yourselves, and I may tell you what shall befall you in the days to come." Okay, that term, days to come, it's also translated the last days. It's a very interesting little term there. It refers to a time in the future when Elohim announced purposes for a particular group or a particular nation or for the world, and that these things were about to be consummated. The writer of Hebrews says the last days started at the time of Messiah. In Hebrews 1, verses 1 and 2, Elohim, after he spoke long ago to the fathers and the prophets in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the world. Now, most often, it refers to Israel's final rebellion against Elohim. In Deuteronomy 31, verse 29, we read, "For I know that after my death you will act corruptly and turn from the way which I commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days. For you will do that which is evil in the sight of Yahweh, provoking him to anger with the work of your hands." Also, it's a time of great trouble is what it's going to be accompanied by. Deuteronomy 4, verse 30, "When you are in distress and all these things have come upon you in the latter days, you will return to Yahweh your Elohim and listen to his voice. For Yahweh your Elohim is a compassionate Elohim. He will not fail you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant with your fathers, which he swore to them." Also Ezekiel 38, verse 16, "And you'll come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. It will come about in the last days that I shall bring you against my land, in order that the nations may know me, when I shall be sanctified through you before your eyes, O Gog." And also the time of the return of Messiah. In Hosea 3:5, "Afterward the sons of Israel will return and seek Yahweh their Elohim and David their king, and they'll come trembling to Yahweh and to his goodness in the last days." In Ezekiel and Hosea and other scriptures, when it talks about they're going to turn back to David, David their king, that's a reference to Messiah. It's a reference to the promise that Elohim, the covenant Elohim made with David, saying that your descendants will be on the throne forever. So it's talking about a descendant of David. Genesis 49, verses 2 through 4. "Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Uncontrolled as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch." Jacob has taken away the birthright of Reuben, and he gave it to the sons of Joseph. Can he do that? Well, he did it, didn't he? You know, keep in mind a couple things here. If you look into this a little deeper, Genesis 21, starting at verse 15, "If a man has two wives, the one loved and the other unloved, both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons. If the firstborn son belongs to the unloved, then it shall be in the day he wills what he has to his sons. He cannot make the son of the loved the firstborn before the son of the unloved, who is the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the unloved, by giving him a double portion of all that he has. For he's the beginning of his strength. To him belongs the right of the firstborn." The beginning of the strength, that's how he described Reuben. Okay? Well, if, as we have postulated over time, that Torah was already given to the people, well, then how could he do this? You know, it would appear, if we look at the very next passage in Deuteronomy 21, starting at verse 18, if any man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or mother, when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them. Then his father and mother shall seize him, bring him out to the elders of his city. At the gateway of his hometown, they shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of his city shall stone him to death. So you shall remove the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear of it and fear. Well, you know, Reuben should consider himself lucky because he was worse than rebellious and stubborn. Okay? He went into his father's wife's bed. That was in Genesis 35, verse 22. It came about while Israel was dwelling in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Now there were 12 sons of Jacob. You know, Israel didn't bring this shameful act to the authorities and didn't have, let's say, justice done. But when it comes to the birthright, you're dead to me. Okay? And he's lucky he wasn't really dead to him. He was fortunate. So he took away Reuben's birthright and his blessing. Verse 5. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter into their counsel. Let not my glory be united with their assembly, because in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Simeon and Levi, they were the culprits behind the attack of that city. That was in Shechem. That's in Genesis 34, verses 25 and 26. Now it came about on the third day when they were in pain that two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword, came upon the city unawares, and killed every male. And they killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went forth. So that whole town, he killed all the males, just killed them all. And Jacob hated that, absolutely hated. They killed some innocent people because they were shamed. Okay, they were shamed. Their sister was playing the harlot, so to speak, and you can see they had to go to the guy's house and get her. It wasn't a nice. Yep, you remember when we talked to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said, "How old are you?" And he said, "Well, I got news for you. My happy days have been few." Okay, very few happy days. My years have been long and trying, and this is part of it right here. I mean, he spent a lot of his youth dealing with good old Uncle Laban. That was no fun. Well, they're described by Jacob as these two brothers are as instruments of cruelty. Simeon, as a tribe, never really gained any prominence at all. We're going to go into numbers here later, months down the maybe a year or two down the road. But when the first census is taken, Simeon has 59,300 people or men in it. Now, in the census just before entering the promised land, they're reduced down to 22,200. Neither in the blessing of Moses in Deuteronomy 33, nor in the song of Deborah, Judges 5, is the tribe of Simeon even mentioned. That's why the list of tribes are different in different places in Scripture. Because if you look at it, how many do you really have now that are descendants? Total. You have 14. You've got the 12 sons of Jacob, and you've got the 2 sons of Joseph. Okay, now if you're going to list, quote, the 12 tribes, who do you leave out? They leave out different ones. Sometimes Dan is left out. A lot of times Simeon's left out. But that's why when the tribes are listed, for one reason or another, they're never the same list. Okay, almost never. Well, Levi was still cursed, and they were scattered throughout Israel as the priests of the people. They were given the blessing of priests because of their faithfulness in the wilderness. That's in Exodus 32, starting at verse 26. Then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, "Whoever is for Yahweh, come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered together to him, and he said to them, "Thus says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, every man of you put his sword upon his thigh and go back and forth from gate to gate in the camp, and kill every man his brother, and every man his friend, every man his neighbor." So the sons of Levi did as Moses instructed, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. Okay, going back to Genesis 49, the blessing of Jacob's children. Verse 8, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. Now, the blessing was not given to the 3 oldest sons because of the reasons we talked about. So the blessing falls upon the 4th in line, and that's Judah. Jacob says that his brothers will praise him. Psalm 76:1, Elohim is known in Judah, his name is great in Israel. His hand shall be on the neck of his enemies, he said. And Psalm 78, starting at verse 68, but chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved, and he built a sanctuary like the heights, like the earth which he's founded forever. He also chose David his servant and took him from the sheepfolds. From the care of the ewes with suckling lambs, he brought him to shepherd Jacob his people and Israel his inheritance. Isaiah 9 verse 7, there'll be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Yahweh of hosts will accomplish this. And Hebrews 10 verses 12 and 13, but he, having offered one sacrifice for sins for all time, sat down at the right hand of Elohim, waiting from that time onward until his enemies be made a footstool for his feet. It also says your father's children will bow down to you. 2 Samuel 5 verses 3 and 4. So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them before Yahweh at Hebron, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Philippians 2, verses 9 through 11, therefore also Elohim highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Yeshua every knee should bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Yeshua Messiah is Master, to the glory of Elohim the Father. So these things he's predicting for Judah came true. Verse 9, Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you've gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him up? So Judah is called a lion. He'll have a son that rises to take possession of the whole earth. In Revelation 5, verse 5, and one of the elders said to me, stop weeping, behold, the lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals. Genesis 49, verse 10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. That it reads in this translation. When David was made king, no man from any other tribe was to be king, just Judah. Now, some translations say that Judah will be the lawgiver, and not like in the New King James there at the bottom. It says, Gilead is mine, Manasseh is mine, Ephraim also is the helmet for my head. Judah is my scepter in New American Standard. Judah is my lawgiver in the New King James. The word can go essentially either way. The passage describes Elohim as the king, the lawgiver, and the judge, and he as a manifestation of him being Messiah. That's what Yeshua is. In Isaiah 33, verse 22, for Yahweh is our judge, Yahweh is our lawgiver. Yahweh is our king. He will save us. I don't know if you know this or not. I've mentioned it before. Our nation was founded with this passage in mind. What are our three different sectors of government? Executive, legislative, and what? Judicial. So our judge, lawgiver, king. That's how we decided to break it up.
We got off of that, didn't we? Over the years.
Well, we need some work on that, yeah. Until Shiloh comes. That's a reference to Messiah. Isaiah 9, verse 6, for a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty Elohim, Eternal Peace, or Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. Once again, until Shiloh comes, and that's a reference to Messiah. Isaiah 11, starting at verse 1, then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. And the Spirit of Yahweh will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. And he'll delight in the fear of Yahweh, and he will not judge by what his eyes see, nor make a decision by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he'll judge the poor, and decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth, and he'll strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he'll slay the wicked. Also righteousness will be the belt about his loins, and faithfulness the belt about his waist. Jeremiah 23, verses 5 and 6, behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I shall raise up for David a righteous branch, and he'll reign as king and act wisely and do justice and righteousness in the land. In his days Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell securely, and this is his name by which he'll be called, Yahweh our righteousness. And one more, Matthew 21, verse 9, and the multitudes going before him and those who followed after were crying out, saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. Hosanna in the highest. Let's go back to Genesis 49. Verse 11. He ties his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. Okay, a little bit cryptic here. What did riding a donkey symbolize back then? Royalty. Right. It was royalty. When he rode in to Jerusalem on a donkey, he was proclaiming himself as king. Okay? That's what he was doing. And they said he was. Well, he's going to ride up to the place where the grapes are going to be squished. And he's going to park there. What does that mean when Judah's descendant will wash his clothes in the blood of grapes? It means there's going to be a lot of grape stomping. That's what that means. He's coming in judgment. That's what that means. Isaiah 63, starting at verse 1. Who is this who comes from Edom? Who's Edom now? Who are they now? They were absorbed by Saudi Arabia. With garments of glowing colors from Bozrah. That's a city in Edom. This one who is majestic in his apparel, marching in the greatness of his strength. It is I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Why is your apparel red, and your garments like the one who treads in the winepress? I've trodden the wine trough alone, and from the peoples there was no man with me. I also trod them in my anger and trampled them in my wrath. And their lifeblood is sprinkled on my garments, and I stained all my raiment. In Revelation 14, starting at verse 18, and another angel, the one who has power over fire, came out from the altar, and he called with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, Put in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, because her grapes are ripe. And the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth, and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of Elohim. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood came out from the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 200 miles. That's a lot of blood. Still talking about Judah here. In Genesis 49, verse 12, his eyes are dull from wine and his teeth white from milk. His eyes being dull from wine speaks of his sorrow and judgment. He's not happy doing this. Teeth being white seems to speak of his harsh judgment. Verse 13. That's all of Judah now. We'll go to the other ones. Zebulun shall dwell at the seashore. He shall be a haven for ships, and his flank shall be toward Sidon. Zebulun, it says they shall dwell by the haven of the sea. Interesting thing about them, though, they don't border the sea. They were inland. Deuteronomy 33, verses 18 and 19. And of Zebulun he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in your going forth, and Issachar in your tents. They shall call peoples to the mountain. There they shall offer righteous sacrifices, for they shall draw out the abundance of the seas and the hidden treasures of the sand. Now, if you look, Zebulun is right here. See, it's kind of landlocked. But it still enjoyed the abundance of the sea. Verses 14 and 15. Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. When he saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens and became a slave at forced labor. Now, Issachar is being chided here. And if one studies the time of Joshua and Judges, it would appear that Israel has a tough time dislodging a lot of the Canaanites. And Issachar may have had a part in this by having a passive attitude toward their hostile neighbors. And it would appear that Issachar would rather work with them than drive them out, as they're commanded. Their tribe is not even mentioned in the inventory of tribes in Judges chapter 1. Verse 16, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path that bites the horse's heels so that the rider falls backward. For your salvation, your Yeshua, I wait, O Yahweh. Dan will judge his people. And some of the judges were from the tribe of Dan, one being Samson, for instance. Verse 19, as for Gad, raiders shall raid him, but he shall raid at their heels. I don't know what historic event they're talking about here. A good description, though, of the demon-possessed man of the Gadarenes who was possessed by the legion of demons in Mark 5 could be what this is talking about. After Yeshua drove his demons out, he wanted to travel with him. But Yeshua told him to go back to his people and tell them what he'd done for him, and he was obedient and told others, and a lot of the Danites repented. And that's the only thing I can think, is it's referring to that Gadarene that had all the demons in him. Verse 20, as for Asher, his food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal dainties. Well, the territory of Asher, it was famous for its olives and olive oil. In Deuteronomy 33, verses 24 and 25, and of Asher he said, more blessed than sons is Asher. May he be favored by his brothers, and may he dip his foot in oil. Your locks shall be iron and bronze, and according to your days, so shall your leisurely walk be. Verse 21, Naphtali is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. This was probably fulfilled when Yeshua started teaching. We read in Matthew 4, starting at verse 13, and leaving Nazareth, he came and settled in Capernaum, which is by the sea in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet, saying, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who were sitting in darkness saw a great light, and to those who were sitting in the land in shadow of death, upon them a light dawned. Hence, Naphtali is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. Verse 22 of Genesis 49. Joseph is a fruitful bough by the spring. Its branches run over a wall. The archers bitterly attacked him, and he shot at him and harassed him. But his bow remained firm, and his arms were agile. From the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from there is the one shepherd, the stone of Israel. Now, the term Joseph, that's a reference to the sons of Joseph, which are Manasseh and Ephraim. Jacob compares him to a fruitful bough by the well with branches running over the wall. And it's difficult to ascertain exactly what's meant by archers who have a shot at him and hated him. It could be his brothers. His brothers sold him off into slavery. There's one other thought. There's only one guy described as an archer in Scripture. That's Ishmael. And who are the sons of Ishmael? Muslims. So that could be what this is referring to. Jacob says that Joseph remained strong, and that fits well with the life of Joseph. But if it's prophetic, it could be referring to Israel today too. The reference to the shepherd, the stone of Israel, that's pointing to Elohim himself. Verses 25 and 26. And from the Elohim of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb, the blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors, up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. Jacob blesses Joseph with blessings of the deep and of offspring. Jacob says he was blessed even greater than his fathers. He extends those blessings now directly on to the head of Joseph. He says that Joseph will be distinguished above his brothers, or that he is. Verse 27, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he divides the spoil. Strange thing about Benjamin. Remember, he didn't want Benjamin to leave the house because he was afraid he'd lose him. But here he's described as something entirely different. There are several instances in the books of Judges, Samuel, and Chronicles when the Benjaminites were fierce warriors. 2 of David's mighty men were from the tribe of Benjamin, and these things here seem to be targeted by Israel, by Jacob. Verse 28, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them, every one, with the blessing appropriate to him. So that's how he ended his life, with blessing his children. It's a unifying gesture and one that showed the power of Elohim in his life. Verse 29, then he charged them and said to them, I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite. In the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field from Ephron the Hittite for a burial site. So Jacob tells his sons to bury him in the place that his fathers are buried. And the place is there. I mean, they built there's a shrine there. That's where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are buried. But when Israel or Jacob told Joseph when they were alone, he made Joseph promise to follow through. Okay? That was back last week in Genesis 47, starting at verse 29. When the time for Israel to die drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, Please, if I found favor in your sight, place now your hand under my thigh and deal with me in kindness and faithfulness. Please do not bury me in Egypt. But when I lie down with my fathers, you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you have said. And he said, Swear to me. So he swore to him. Then Israel bowed and worshiped at the head of his bed. But now here in chapter 49, he's coming back and tells all the kids that. Why? First of all, I don't think he trusts the kids. All right? The one he does trust is Joseph. And what good would it do any way to make anyone but Joseph promise this. He's the only one that can do it. All right? They don't have the power just to up and leave and do what they want. Okay, and bury him wherever they want. Joseph does. Joseph can do what he wants. So he obligated Joseph in that case. Verse 31, there they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it purchased from the sons of Heth. When Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew his feet into the bed and breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. So Jacob was apparently sitting on the side of his bed. He drew his feet onto the bed, and he breathed his last. The term there was gathered to his people. Interesting term. It's not talking about a ghost that floats up to be with Grandpa Abraham and Daddy Isaac. What it is, it's a reference to the fulfillment of that last wish. Okay? He wanted to be buried in the land given to him by Elohim, and where is buried Abraham and Isaac. If this verse is read in context with the other verses, it's clear it's a reference to his burial. We're given greater detail in the next chapter, which is the last chapter in Genesis. Any questions on Genesis 48 and 49?